Hello, weary traveller. Tonight we will explore the truth behind a phenomenon often cloaked in romantic myth, a practice so bizarre and cruel it's hard to reconcile with the beauty it produced. If this journey helps you drift into slumber, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales from history's shadows. And before we begin, tell me, where in this vast world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Chapter 1. The Illusion of Heavenly Voices. It is the late 17th century, or perhaps the early 18th, in the sun-drenched yet shadow-laden streets of Italy. The air hangs thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts, incense wafting from grand cathedrals, and the ever-present murmur of a bustling city. You, a young boy, perhaps 9 or 10, with eyes full of the wide-eyed wonder of childhood, possess a gift. Not a gift of physical strength, nor of scholarly brilliance, but something far more ethereal. Something that could, your parents believe, lift your family out of the gnawing clutches of poverty. You have a voice like a clear bell, pure and sweet, capable of reaching notes that seem to defy gravity, notes that can stir the soul and bring tears to the eyes of even the most jaded listener. The myth, the beautiful lie woven through the fabric of your society, is that this voice, this miraculous instrument, is a direct conduit to the divine. It is said that angels themselves envy such purity, that God smiles upon those who can articulate his glory in such a sublime register. And the Church, ever hungry for such unearthly sounds to fill its vast echoing spaces, actively seeks out these rare talents. The opera houses, too, demand them, their audiences clamoring for the breathtaking virtuosity only these voices can deliver. This is the fantasy sold to desperate parents, to ambitious maestri, and most cruelly to the boys themselves, too young to truly comprehend the profound implications of the path being laid out before them. They speak of fame, of fortune, of adoration, of a life free from the back-breaking toil of the fields or the grime of the city streets. They speak of art, of sanctity, of a destiny grander than any peasant boy could ever dream. You might hear whispers in the piazza, tales of celebrated castrati, men who command audiences, whose names are known across all of Europe, men who wear silken clothes and live in opulent villas. You might see a carriage roll by, its cushioned interior hiding the figure of a revered singer, a glimpse of a life so far removed from your own humble dwelling, from the smell of stale bread and damp earth. This is the bait, the glittering illusion dangled before families teetering on the precipice of destitution. They see not the boy, but the potential vessel, the means to an end. Your voice is not simply yours, it is a commodity, a ticket. And in an age where life was brutish and short for the common folk, where disease ravaged families and hunger was a constant companion, such a ticket was seen, by some, as a divine intervention in itself. But the truth, my dear listener, is a far more chilling symphony. Forget the romanticized image of the celebrated virtuoso gliding across the stage in a swirl of satin and lace. Forget the notion of a consensual choice made by a mature artist for the sake of their craft. The reality began long before the spotlight, in the grim silence of a back room, or the hurried secrecy of a barber-surgeon's establishment. The truth began with a decision made for a child, a decision from which there was no return, a decision predicated on ignorance, desperation, and a profound misunderstanding of the human body and spirit. This was not a pathway to artistic freedom. It was a physical mutilation, an act of brutal surgery performed on boys on the very cusp of adolescence, before the natural biological changes of puberty could begin their irreversible work on the voice. The term itself, castrato, carries a weight of unspoken suffering. It denotes one who has been castrated, a euphemism for the removal of the testes. This was done crudely, without anesthesia as we know it today, often with only a numbing agent like opium or a cold bath to induce shock and dull the pain. The rationale was deceptively simple. Without the influx of testosterone, the vocal cords would not thicken, the larynx would not descend, and the growth spurt, particularly of the skeleton, would be dramatically altered. The boy's voice would retain its prepubertal purity, its high, clear range, but with the added power and lung capacity of an adult chest. A potent combination indeed, one that captivated audiences, producing a sound that was both angelic and unsettlingly unnatural. The selection process was a cruel lottery. Families, often large and struggling, would present their sons to choir masters or agents, hoping against hope that one of them possessed that rare, exquisite timbre. The boy would be made to sing, his small chest swelling with breath, his voice soaring, oblivious to the true nature of the audition. The maestri would listen, their expressions critical, assessing not just the current sound, but its potential to endure, to avoid the inevitable breaking of a normal male voice. Imagine the scene, a room, perhaps dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken tension. The boy stands, small and vulnerable, his voice ringing out, a beacon of hope for his family, a potential sentence for himself. The decision, once made, was absolute. There was no going back, no second thoughts. This was not an act of malice in the traditional sense, but rather a chilling byproduct of a specific cultural moment, a peculiar confluence of religious dogma, artistic demand, and desperate poverty. It was rationalized as a necessary sacrifice for the sacred, for the sublime. God needs these voices, they would say, conveniently overlooking the immense human cost. It is for their future, for their salvation, the parents would assure themselves, trying to quell the rising tide of guilt. The boy, in his innocence, simply understood that something momentous was happening, something that would change his life forever, though the full horror of that change would only reveal itself slowly, irrevocably, over the years to come. He was a vessel, not a choice-maker, his body a canvas upon which a strange and beautiful, yet deeply unsettling, art would be painted. The stage was set, not just for a performance, but for a lifetime of consequences, felt in the very marrow of his bones and the quiet chambers of his heart. The narrative of desperation begins in the cramped, often squalid homes of the working poor. Life was a constant struggle for survival. Disease, famine, and war were ever-present specters. A large family, with many mouths to feed and meager resources, faced impossible choices daily. For a promising boy with a beautiful voice, the temptation to seize this singular opportunity must have been overwhelming for his parents. They were told it was a way out, a chance for a better life for their son and, by extension, for the entire family. The church, with its immense power and influence, offered scholarships, housing, and food within its conservatorios, institutions that were effectively boarding schools for musical training. This promise of stability, of a path away from manual labor or inevitable street begging, shimmered like a mirage in the arid landscape of their lives. Consider the atmosphere surrounding such a decision. It was not a casual conversation. It was hushed, fraught with internal debate, perhaps tears, and ultimately a desperate hope. The boy, young and trusting, would have absorbed the pervasive anxiety of his parents, the unspoken pressure to be the one who could save them all. He might have seen the threadbare clothes, felt the gnawing emptiness in his stomach, witnessed the quiet despair in his mother's eyes. The idea of becoming a singer for the church or for the grand opera sounded like a fairy tale compared to the bleak reality of his present. The notion of a divine calling, of serving God with his voice, was a powerful, comforting narrative offered by priests and choirmasters, wrapping the stark truth in a cloak of piety. But the process was rarely transparent. Parents were often led to believe the procedure was minor, akin to a routine medical treatment, or that it would be performed by skilled hands in a reputable institution. The full, terrifying implications, the permanent mutilation, the lifelong physical and psychological consequences, were either deliberately obscured or simply beyond the comprehension of uneducated families living hand to mouth. They believed, or desperately wanted to believe, that this was a gateway to salvation, a miraculous intervention from above. This pervasive, almost fanatical belief in the power of music and its perceived connection to the divine provided a convenient moral framework for an otherwise indefensible act. The very air they breathed was thick with this justification, a societal acceptance born of spiritual fervor and profound economic hardship. The audition itself was a moment of immense tension. A small, usually cold room, perhaps in a church annex or a patron's home. The boy would be nervous, his small voice trembling, but capable of astonishing purity. The choirmaster, often a seasoned musician with a keen ear for vocal potential, would listen intently, his expression impassive. He wasn't just listening for a beautiful sound. He was listening for the right kind of beautiful sound, one that indicated the specific vocal anatomy that would benefit from the procedure, a voice that possessed the clarity, agility, and perhaps, crucially, the underlying power that hinted at a capacity to grow in volume and stamina without deepening. This wasn't just an artistic judgment. It was a cold, clinical assessment of biological potential for a very specific and violent intervention. The silence after the last note would be agonizing, stretched thin with the weight of expectation. A nod, a simple gesture, was all it took to seal a young life's fate, to set it on a course from which there was no turning back. The very silence was a precursor to the grim, unspoken act that would follow, forever shaping the trajectory of that boy's body and soul. Even if a family was not impoverished, the social cachet and potential for renown offered by a musical career, especially within the church, could be a powerful motivator. For a child from a respectable but not noble background, becoming a celebrated singer might represent a significant upward mobility, a chance to move among the elite and secure a comfortable, privileged existence far removed from the mundane concerns of their birth. This was not merely about survival, but about aspiration, about grasping at the glittering promise of a life adorned with luxury and public adoration. The stories of successful castrati who moved in the highest social circles and amassed considerable fortunes served as powerful propaganda, painting a picture of an almost fairy tale existence. These narratives, circulated through whispers in the coffee houses and printed broadsides, overshadowed the uncomfortable truths that lay beneath the surface. The parents might have justified the act to themselves and to their son, not just as a religious sacrifice or an economic necessity, but as a strategic investment in a life of unparalleled artistic fulfillment and social triumph. This pervasive cultural belief system, where the pursuit of a particular musical aesthetic could justify such a radical intervention on a child's body, allowed for a collective blindness to the inherent cruelty. The demand was so overwhelming, the perceived benefits so great, that the individual's bodily autonomy, especially that of a child, was simply not considered. It was a trade-off, a perceived bargain with fate, where a fleeting, painful moment promised a lifetime of unparalleled sound and elevated status. This underlying societal acceptance of the means, driven by a fervent desire for the end, solidified the castrato's path as a unique and disturbing chapter in human history, born from a peculiar blend of artistic fervor, religious decree, and the relentless pressure of social ambition. The delicate structure of an innocent voice was destined to become a powerful but profoundly altered instrument for a world hungry for the extraordinary. Chapter 2. The Silent Severing. The air in the room is still, heavy with unspoken dread. You are led in, your small hand clammy in your mother's, your heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against your ribs. The light filtering through the grimy window is weak, painting dusty motes dancing in the silence. There is a coldness to the atmosphere, a clinical detachment that prickles your skin. The scent of disinfectant, or perhaps just a crude antiseptic made of herbs and strong spirits, stings your nostrils, mingling with the earthy smell of unwashed bodies and the lingering odor of fear. You don't understand the precise nature of what is to happen, but the adult whispers, the hushed tones, the solemn faces, all communicate a profound seriousness, a point of no return. You are told it is for your voice, for your future. They speak of a small procedure, a fleeting discomfort for a lifetime of glory. The words are hollow, a thin veil over the grim reality. You might be given a sweet drink, laced with opium or another sedative, its bitter taste lingering on your tongue as a dullness begins to creep into your limbs, a sleepy haze blurring the edges of your perception. Or perhaps, more brutally, you are simply plunged into a bath of ice-cold water, the shock intended to numb your senses, to render you less capable of resistance. The cold seeps into your bones, stealing your breath, making your teeth chatter uncontrollably. Your body protests, shivering violently, a premonition of the deep, irreversible chill about to settle within you. The figures around you are shadowy, indistinct. A barber surgeon, perhaps, his hands calloused, his eyes weary from countless such procedures. An assistant holding you down, offering grim comfort. Your own parents, standing by, their faces etched with a complex mixture of hope, despair, and a desperate, agonizing love. The room might be a makeshift surgery in a back alley, or a more formal, yet still terrifying, chamber within a conservatorio, a training school for musicians. The instruments gleam dully in the dim light. A sharp knife, a cauterizing iron, cloths, bowls of water. These are not tools of healing, but of alteration, of fundamental change. You are laid down, perhaps on a rough wooden table or a simple cot. The touch of the cold metal against your skin is a shock, a sudden, sharp jolt that cuts through the induced stupor. You might cry out, a small choked sound, instantly stifled. The pain is swift, excruciating, a searing agony that eclipses all else. Your body convulses, an involuntary spasm of pure, unadulterated torment. There is no gentle hand, no comforting voice, only the sharp, agonizing sensation, followed by a profound, disorienting void.
It is a moment that rips through your innocent world, leaving an indelible mark not just on your flesh, but on your very soul. The world blurs, fades to black, and you fall into a merciful oblivion, a darkness that is both a nightmare and a temporary escape. When you awaken, the world feels different. The pain is no longer a sharp spear, but a dull, throbbing ache, a persistent phantom presence in the lower part of your body. You are weak, disoriented, your head heavy on the pillow. The air is still thick with that antiseptic scent, but now it is mingled with the faint, metallic tang of dried blood. You might feel a heavy bandage or a rough cloth pressed against the altered part of your body. Moving is difficult, each shift sending a fresh wave of discomfort through you. Your stomach churns, and you feel the sickly weakness of someone who has suffered a profound trauma. The recovery is slow, arduous. Days bleed into weeks, marked by alternating bouts of fever and chills, by the constant nagging ache that refuses to entirely recede. You are nursed by weary hands, fed thin broths, and given more bitter medicines. The physical discomfort is omnipresent. The tenderness, the stiffness, the inability to move freely without a sharp reminder of what has been done. Each small movement, each shift in posture sends a ripple of discomfort, a constant nagging reminder that your body is no longer truly your own. You are now irrevocably altered, a living testament to a barbaric practice justified by art and desperate circumstances. The long-term physiological impact begins immediately, subtle at first, then increasingly pronounced as your body attempts to navigate growth without its crucial hormonal drivers. The very essence of your being, your developing masculinity, has been stifled, redirected into an unnatural path. You will never experience the deepening of the voice that marks the passage from boy to man. Your bones, deprived of the signals for normal adolescent development, will continue to grow in ways that lead to disproportionate limbs and a characteristic skeletal structure. The changes are not just internal, they will manifest outwardly, becoming part of your very identity, marking you as forever different. The preparatory moments before the procedure were often a theatre of grim determination and suppressed terror. Imagine the silence, broken only by the crackle of a small fire or the distant muffled sounds of a city unaware of the quiet violence unfolding. The boy, perhaps given a piece of candy or a small toy, would cling to it, a fragile anchor in a world that was suddenly too large and frightening. He might have been told he was going to become an angel, that his voice would truly soar to the heavens. Such promises, spoken softly but with an underlying current of urgency, were meant to soothe, to distract, to secure compliance from a child who was utterly powerless. The taste of the sedative, if offered, was often foul, a sickly sweetness that coated the tongue and slowly dulled the senses, pushing the world into a fuzzy, dreamlike state. But even through the haze, the prickle of fear would remain, a cold knot in the pit of his stomach. The barber-surgeon, often more butcher than healer, would work quickly. Their hands, though practiced, were rough. The lack of proper hygiene meant infection was a constant, terrifying risk. The instruments, perhaps sterilized with fire or simply wiped clean, were crude. The air would fill with the metallic tang of blood,
the sharp scent of alcohol or vinegar used as a primitive disinfectant, and the visceral smell of flesh. The sounds, if the child was not fully sedated, would be agonizing. A sharp intake of breath, a choked cry, the sickening sound of the cut itself. Even if unconscious, the body's involuntary spasms, the clenching of muscles, would speak volumes of the trauma inflicted.
It was an act of profound violence, carried out in the name of purity and art, leaving an invisible scar deeper than any incision. The warmth would drain from the affected area, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness that would resonate through the boy's entire being. Awakening from that forced oblivion was often met with a searing headache, the lingering taste of bile in the mouth, and an overwhelming weakness that felt as if the very life force had been partly siphoned away. The dull, persistent ache in his lower abdomen was a constant, throbbing reminder of the physical violation. Every attempt to shift, to stretch, to simply exist was met with waves of sharp discomfort. He might have felt a fever creeping into his limbs, the chills making his teeth chatter, signaling the insidious threat of infection. The air in the recovery space, often a simple, unheated room, would feel heavy, thick with the smell of old linens, sweat, and the faint, sweet scent of blood that refused to entirely dissipate. The weeks that followed were a blur of discomfort and limited movement. Nursing was rudimentary, fresh though coarse bandages applied with indifferent hands, watery gruel forced down a reluctant throat, and bitter herbal concoctions meant to ward off fever, though their efficacy was questionable. The isolation was profound. Confined to a bed, unable to run and play like other boys, the silence of the room was punctuated only by the occasional visit from an adult, their faces solemn, their words few. The boy might stare at the ceiling for hours, his mind struggling to comprehend the permanence of what had been done. He would touch the bandaged area tentatively, feeling the unfamiliar flatness, the absence, a void where a part of him once was. This tangible loss, even for a child who couldn't articulate its full meaning, was a heavy burden on his nascent understanding of self.
Beyond the immediate trauma, the body began its slow, inevitable divergence from a natural male development. The signals that would trigger the adolescent growth spurt, the deepening of the voice, the broadening of the shoulders, were simply absent. Instead, his bones, particularly the long bones of his limbs, would continue to grow, leading to a willowy, elongated frame. His chest would often broaden and deepen, not with masculine musculature, but with a unique, almost barrel-like expansion, giving him extraordinary lung capacity. This was the unintended benefit of the procedure, the physical adaptation that allowed for the astonishing sustained notes and power that would later captivate audiences. But it came at the cost of a natural, harmonious physical form. The quiet, internal awareness of this fundamental alteration settled deep within him. He was no longer just a boy, he was a castrato, marked irrevocably. This wasn't just a physical change, it was a psychological transformation. His childhood, once a realm of uninhibited play and natural development, was abruptly cut short, replaced by a life defined by a surgical intervention and the rigorous demands of music. The silent severing was not merely a physical act, it was a profound fracturing of the self, leaving an indelible mark that would influence every aspect of his future, a quiet pain that even the most soaring melodies could never fully soothe. The immediate aftermath of the surgery was a precarious period, fraught with the very real danger of complications. Given the crude medical knowledge of the time, infection was rampant, often leading to fevers, sepsis, and even death. The initial wound, crudely closed, could fester, filling the air with a sickly sweet scent of decay. Swelling and bruising would persist for days, making even the slightest movement excruciating. The boy would lie prone, often in a small, uncomfortable bed, surrounded by the shadows of a room that now felt like a prison.
The world outside, the vibrant sounds and smells of life, would seem distant and unattainable, filtered through a haze of pain and disorientation. He might experience phantom pains, a ghostly ache where something vital once was, adding a layer of psychological torment to his physical suffering. The healing process was not a clean, swift resolution, but a slow, agonizing crawl towards a new, altered state of being. As weeks turned into months, the more subtle, insidious changes began to manifest. His body, starved of the hormonal cascade that defines male puberty, began to grow in unexpected ways. His long bones, especially those of his arms and legs, continued to lengthen, leading to a noticeable disproportion in his limbs. He might stand taller than his peers, yet possess a delicate, almost fragile build, his frame lacking the muscular development of other adolescent boys. His hands and feet might appear unusually large, contributing to an almost gangly appearance. The very way he moved, his gait and posture, would subtly change, reflecting this new physical reality. His skeleton, without the proper hormonal cues, could become more prone to issues later in life, such as osteoporosis, rendering him vulnerable to fractures. The voice, for which all this had been endured, remained miraculously high and pure. Yet it was a voice encased in a body that was perpetually anomalous. No Adam's apple formed, no beard shadowed his jaw. His skin remained smooth, almost childlike in its texture, contrasting sharply with his adult height. This perpetual ambiguity of physical gender was a constant source of quiet struggle. He was neither boy nor man in appearance, creating a visible marker of his otherness that would follow him throughout his life. Every mirror, every public glance, every comparison to normal men would serve as a poignant reminder of the sacrifice made for his art. The initial act of severing, once a fleeting moment of pain, had set in motion a lifetime of subtle yet profound physical and psychological transformations, irrevocably shaping the man he would become. This silent, fundamental alteration, enacted under the guise of an opportunity, would define his existence, creating a man who was both revered for his extraordinary gift and forever marked by its brutal origin. Chapter 3. A Child's Lost Future. As the raw, immediate pain of the surgery slowly recedes, replaced by a dull, persistent ache, you begin the strange and disorienting journey into a future that has been irrevocably altered. The most obvious change, the one for which this profound sacrifice was made, is your voice. It remains high, pure, and clear, untouched by the natural deepening that would have occurred had your body been allowed its normal course of development. You can still reach those astonishing notes, sustain them with effortless breath, and produce a tone that is indeed angelic. But as the years pass, the dissonance between your voice and your maturing body will become a constant, unsettling presence. The true cost, however, extends far beyond the vocal cords. Your body, deprived of the hormones crucial for male puberty, begins to grow in an unusual, sometimes disquieting way. You will observe your peers, boys who were once your size, shoot up in height, their voices cracking and then settling into deeper registers, their shoulders broadening, their limbs growing more muscular. You, however, continue to grow in a peculiar, elongated fashion. Your long bones, especially those in your arms and legs, may grow disproportionately long, giving you a willowy, almost spindly appearance. Your hands and feet might also seem larger than normal in relation to your torso. This isn't a sudden transformation, but a gradual, subtle elongation over years, making you feel perpetually out of sync with your age group. Your chest cavity, too, develops differently. Without typical hormonal changes, your rib cage tends to expand more, giving you a remarkable lung capacity. This is a key advantage, allowing you to sustain incredibly long, powerful notes, holding a single breath for astonishing durations, filling vast holes with sound. However, it also contributes to a distinct, prominent chest appearance that, combined with elongated limbs, forms a characteristic physical presentation. You also won't develop an Adam's apple, the subtle bulge in the throat, contributing to your unique vocal and physical qualities. Further physical developments unfold gradually. You will not experience the full range of adolescent hormonal shifts. This means a lack of significant facial or body hair, maintaining a smooth complexion well into adulthood. Your skin may remain soft, in contrast to the more robust textures common in other individuals. This difference in development also means a leaner physique, with less muscle definition and often a notable increase in fatty deposits, resulting in a more rounded silhouette. It is a body that retains certain youthful qualities while maturing in its own distinct way. And, of course, there is a fundamental aspect of your development. The capacity to father children, to continue a family line, will not be part of your experience. For a young individual, this realization might emerge slowly, perhaps through observations of others, through quiet adult discussions, or through a dawning awareness of what it means to possess a truly unique life path. This difference is not just physical. It represents a profound departure from common life progression, impacting the potential for one's own family. In a society where family and lineage were paramount, this inability to procreate marked you as fundamentally incomplete, regardless of your artistic achievements. Beyond the visible and reproductive differences, there were often more subtle yet debilitating health consequences. The surgical procedures themselves, crude and unhygienic, often led to infections, fevers, and chronic pain. The lack of proper nutrition during your formative years in the conservatorios, combined with the stress of constant training, could further weaken your constitution. You might be more susceptible to illness, your body less resilient than those who developed naturally. The chronic lack of testosterone could also contribute to issues like osteoporosis later in life, making your bones more brittle and prone to fractures. Imagine the constant subtle aches, the feeling of a body that is not quite right, a subtle disharmony running through your very being. The psychological toll of these physical realities is immense. Every morning you face a reflection that is not fully male, not fully adult, a constant reminder of the decision made for you. In a world with strict gender roles, you exist in an ambiguous space, often subject to curious stares, whispers, and even ridicule. You are an anomaly, a marvel, but also an object of pity or scorn. The very clothes you wear, the way you move, your youthful face combined with your adult height all mark you out. You learn to navigate a world that doesn't quite know where to place you, a world that both adores your voice and recoils, perhaps subtly, from your altered form. This constant awareness of your physical difference, this internal sense of being incomplete, weighs heavily. It shapes your identity, your interactions, your perception of yourself. You might develop a quiet stoicism, a way of detaching from the discomfort. Or you might find yourself battling internal demons of loneliness and self-loathing. Your childhood, the period of natural, unburdened growth, was stolen. In its place, you received a distorted physicality, a body that served a singular purpose, to produce a sound. And while that sound might bring you fame and fortune, it could never heal the quiet wounds etched deep within your physical form and your spirit. This was not merely the loss of a boy's future. It was the reforging of his very existence into a shape dictated by the demands of music, forever marked by what had been taken away. As the years of your youth unfolded, the physical transformations became increasingly pronounced, not abruptly, but subtly, day by day. You would stand beside other boys your age, observing their deepening voices, the sudden coarsening of their skin, the shadow of hair beginning to sprout on their upper lip or jawline. Meanwhile, your own face remained smooth, almost porcelain-like, your voice stubbornly fixed in its high, clear register. This internal contrast, the feeling of being a perpetual boy in a world of maturing men, could be profoundly disorienting. Imagine the quiet, gnawing anxiety as you noticed your own limbs growing longer, perhaps thinner than those of your peers. Your hands and feet perhaps a size too large for your slender wrists and ankles, creating an almost gangly silhouette. The growth of your chest and rib cage was perhaps the most striking internal change, an expansion that granted you the phenomenal lung capacity necessary for sustaining those incredible notes. You could hold a breath for what seemed like an eternity, delivering an unbroken stream of sound that astounded audiences. But this came at a cost to your physique, often resulting in a noticeable widening and deepening of your torso, an almost barrel-like form that, combined with your elongated limbs, contributed to your distinctive castrato appearance. There was no Adam's apple, that visible sign of male maturation, further cementing your unique place in the spectrum of human forms. Your body was a living paradox, an adult's height and frame, yet with the smooth skin and vocal cords of a perpetual adolescent. The lack of male secondary sexual characteristics wasn't just about appearance. It profoundly impacted your sense of self and your place in society. No rough stubble to shave, no deepening voice to announce your arrival into manhood. Instead, a permanent smoothness, a perpetually youthful complexion that could be both a blessing on stage and a source of quiet humiliation off it. Your physical presence was ambiguous, causing confusion and sometimes discomfort in others. In a deeply gendered society, you existed in a liminal space, a walking embodiment of an unspoken question. This constant awareness of your physical difference, the feeling of being perpetually other, settled deep within your bones, shaping your gait, your posture, your very way of carrying yourself in the world. But perhaps the most agonizing realization as you grew was the profound, silent truth of your infertility.
In a society where lineage, family names, and the continuation of the bloodline were paramount, this was a devastating blow. You would never know the warmth of a child of your own, never see your features reflected in a son or daughter. This is not merely a physical absence, it is an emotional void, a severance from the natural cycle of life that most men took for granted. The weight of this biological incompleteness, the knowledge that your family line would end with you, was a quiet sorrow that no amount of fame or fortune could ever truly alleviate. It separated you from the common experience of mankind, marking you as incomplete in a fundamental existential way. Beyond the visible and reproductive differences, there were often more subtle yet debilitating health consequences. The surgical procedures themselves, crude and unhygienic, often led to infections, fevers, and chronic pain. The lack of proper nutrition during your formative years in the conservatorios, combined with the stress of constant training, could further weaken your constitution. You might be more susceptible to illness, your body less resilient than those who developed naturally. The chronic lack of testosterone could also contribute to issues like osteoporosis later in life, making your bones more brittle and prone to fractures. Imagine the constant subtle aches, the feeling of a body that is not quite right, a subtle disharmony running through your very being. The psychological toll of these physical realities is immense. Every morning you face a reflection that is not fully male, not fully adult, a constant reminder of the decision made for you. In a world with strict gender roles, you exist in an ambiguous space, often subject to curious stares, whispers, and even ridicule. You are an anomaly, a marvel, but also an object of pity, of scorn. The very clothes you wear, the way you move, your youthful face combined with your adult height all mark you out. You learn to navigate a world that doesn't quite know where to place you, a world that both adores your voice and recoils, perhaps subtly, from your altered form. This constant awareness of your physical difference, this internal sense of being incomplete, weighs heavily. It shapes your identity, your interactions, your perception of yourself. You might develop a quiet stoicism, a way of detaching from the discomfort, or you might find yourself battling internal demons of loneliness and self-loathing. Your childhood, the period of natural, unburdened growth, was stolen. In its place, you received a distorted physicality, a body that served a singular purpose, to produce a sound. And while that sound might bring you fame and fortune, it could never heal the quiet wounds etched deep within your physical form and your spirit. This was not merely the loss of a boy's future, it was the reforging of his very existence, into a shape dictated by the demands of music, forever marked by what had been taken away. The constant comparison to other males, particularly those who went through a natural puberty, created an unshakable sense of inadequacy. Boys you grew up with transformed into strapping young men, their voices deepening, their bodies solidifying into masculine forms, their lives oriented towards traditional societal roles like marriage and family. You, by contrast, remained physically distinct, a living anomaly. This dissonance was not just about superficial appearance, it permeated your very being, affecting your self-esteem and your ability to form a coherent sense of identity. You were defined by an absence, by what was not there rather than by what was. This created a profound inner conflict, a quiet struggle that few outside your unique fraternity could ever truly understand. The clothes you wore, though they might be luxurious, often felt like a costume. Even the way you sat, stood, or walked was subtly influenced by your altered proportions, further distinguishing you from other men. The emotional consequences were often devastating. The inability to experience a conventional adolescence, the sexual development that others navigated, created a profound sense of isolation. You might struggle with feelings of loneliness, regret, and a deep-seated sadness for the life that was denied to you. Some castrati found solace in their art, pouring all their emotional energy into their performances, allowing their voices to express the depths of feeling they struggled to articulate in their personal lives.
Others became withdrawn, melancholic, or adopted an almost cynical detachment, using wit or an exaggerated persona to mask their inner turmoil. The psychological resilience required to navigate such a unique and challenging existence was immense. Many, despite their fame, harbored a quiet, persistent yearning for a normalcy that was forever out of reach. The constant public scrutiny of their physical difference, coupled with the private reality of their incompleteness, meant that their lives were often a testament to profound endurance, but also to an enduring, unhealed wound. The physical landscape of their bodies was a map of past trauma, forever charting a course that diverged from the well-trodden path of human development, leaving them in a unique, celebrated, yet profoundly isolated realm. The quiet, almost imperceptible shifts in self-perception over years coalesced into a deep understanding of your unusual place in the world, a realization that fame and wealth, though comforting, could never truly fill the void left by a lost childhood and a denied future. Chapter 4. The Golden Cage, the Iron Heart. Emerging from the physical recovery, you are now fully committed to the path chosen for you. Your new home is often a conservatorio, a specialized music school, a place where the air vibrates with scales and arpeggios, and the strict rules hang heavier than the velvet drapes. This is your new family, your new world, a golden cage of musical excellence, yet one with bars forged of iron discipline. The illusion of a quick ascent to fame quickly dissipates, replaced by the relentless, grinding reality of training. The day begins before dawn. You are roused from your thin cot, the rough wool blanket offering little comfort against the morning chill. The scent of stale wood smoke and unwashed bodies lingers in the communal dormitory. There is no time for childhood play, no carefree mornings of exploration. Your day is meticulously structured, a rigid regimen of lessons, practice, and more lessons. You might have an hour of singing exercises before breakfast, your voice still thick with sleep, forced into perfect pitch and tone by a stern maestro who tolerates no imperfection. The repeated scales, the sustained notes, the intricate trills, all become etched into your muscle memory, a part of your very breath. Breakfast is meager, perhaps a piece of hard bread, a cup of weak broth, just enough to sustain you through the demanding morning. Then it's straight to music theory. You learn notation, harmony, counterpoint, the complex architecture of sound. The scratch of 100 quills on parchment fills the air, punctuated by the occasional sigh or frustrated murmur. You learn to read music as easily as your own name, to understand its language, to dissect its components. It is not just about producing beautiful sound. It is about understanding its very essence, its mathematical precision, its emotional resonance. The afternoons are often dedicated to instrumental training. Many castrati were also accomplished instrumentalists, often on the harpsichord or organ, mastering the complexities of their craft with the same unwavering dedication as their vocal studies.
Imagine your fingers, still small and perhaps a bit clumsy, navigating the smooth, cool keys, the intricate patterns of notes unfolding beneath them. The conservatorio is a symphony of focused sounds, a lone violin weeping in one room, a flute trilling in another, the persistent drone of a sustained vocal note from a distant practice chamber. It is a cacophony of individual effort, all working towards a singular, demanding goal. The discipline is unyielding. Any slight deviation from pitch, any missed note, any sign of laziness or inattention is met with sharp reproof, or worse, the sting of a rattan cane across your knuckles.
The maestri are not just teachers, they are taskmasters, shaping not only your voice, but your entire being into a perfectly tuned instrument. Your emotional responses are often suppressed, considered a distraction from the rigorous demands of your art. You are taught to be precise, to be controlled, to channel all your energy into your performance. There is no room for youthful rebellion, no space for individual whims. Your life is no longer your own. It belongs to your voice, to the demanding standards of your training. The psychological toll of this existence is profound. You are cut off from the warmth and natural rhythms of family life. Holidays, celebrations, the small joys of everyday existence with loved ones became distant memories. Your peers in the conservatorio are your rivals as much as your companions, all striving for the same limited spots at the top. The competition is fierce, unspoken, yet ever present. You are surrounded by other boys who share your unique physical state, but each is also a reminder of your own lost normalcy. The isolation is deep-seated, a quiet ache that no amount of musical success can truly alleviate. You live in a bubble, separated from the broader society by your unusual condition and by the relentless pursuit of artistic perfection. Even your leisure time, what little there is often structured, supervised. Books, theological studies, perhaps some supervised outdoor exercise within the conservatorio walls. The outside world, the smells of the marketplace, the laughter of children playing freely, the ordinary interactions of daily life become distant, almost foreign. You are a specialist, trained for a singular purpose, and that training consumes every waking moment, every ounce of your energy. The concept of free time, as other boys knew it, simply does not exist. The food is plain, often repetitive. Starchy gruel, simple boiled vegetables, perhaps a small portion of meat on special occasions.
It is functional, designed to fuel your demanding schedule, not to delight the senses. The conservatorio itself might be austere, with cold stone floors, minimal heating in winter, and simple furnishings. The focus is on the art, not on comfort. You learn to endure, to suppress discomfort, to find your strength in the unwavering dedication to your voice. This intense, prolonged period of training shapes not just your musical abilities, but your entire personality. You become disciplined, resilient, perhaps a little guarded. You learn to perform, not just on stage, but in life, presenting a polished exterior to a world that will judge you relentlessly. The golden cage offers the promise of fame and fortune, but it comes at the cost of a true childhood, of emotional spontaneity, and of a life lived on your own terms. Your heart, once soft and open, might harden under the relentless pressure, becoming an iron core of determination and perhaps a quiet, lingering sadness for the innocence forever lost within the echoing halls of your training. The daily routine in a conservatorio was a meticulously constructed edifice of sound and silence, discipline and deprivation. Long before the first hint of dawn painted the sky, you would be roused from a shallow sleep by the insistent clang of a bell. The dormitory, a vast echoing chamber, would stir with the rustle of straw mattresses and the sleepy murmurs of dozens of other boys, all sharing the same fate, all driven by the same relentless schedule. The air would be cold and damp, thick with the smell of stale bodies and unwashed wool blankets. There was no time for individual contemplation, no gentle waking. Instead, the immediate call to duty, the cold water splashed on your face to shock you awake, the rough linen towel that did little to warm you. Your first session of the day would often be breath control exercises practiced in a communal hall. You would stand with your peers, chests expanding and contracting rhythmically, learning to manage the vast lung capacity that was now yours. The maestro, a stern figure often shrouded in the early morning gloom, would patrol the rows, listening intently, correcting even the slightest imperfection in posture or exhalation. The silence between breaths was as important as the sound, a tangible tension in the air. Then came the scales, endless repetitions of ascending and descending notes, designed to build agility and precision. Your voice, still sleepy, would be forced to reach for those high, clear tones, again and again until your throat felt raw. But the sound was perfectly controlled. The monotony was profound, yet essential, forging the foundational strength for the virtuosity to come. Breakfast, a stark affair, provided only the bare sustenance needed to endure the morning's grueling schedule. A piece of hard, stale bread, perhaps a meager dollop of watery gruel, or a cup of bitter, diluted wine was all you could expect. The food was fuel, nothing more, devoid of flavor or joy. The clatter of wooden bowls and the hushed sounds of chewing were the only accompaniment. The conservatorio was not a place for indulgence, but for ascetic focus on art. The classrooms, often cold and sparsely furnished, were where the intricate architecture of music was revealed. You learned notation, the delicate curves and lines that translated into sound, harmony, the pleasing interplay of notes, counterpoint, the weaving of independent melodic lines, composition, the creation of entirely new sound worlds. The scratch of dozens of quills on rough parchment was the constant soundtrack, sometimes punctuated by the sharp tap of a maestro's stick on a table, or a frustrated sigh from a struggling classmate. The demands were intellectual as well as physical. You were not just a singer, you were to be a musician, an interpreter, a creator, understanding the very language of sound down to its most minute detail. Afternoons stretched into evenings, filled with instrumental practice, often the harpsichord or organ. Your fingers, once clumsy and small, would learn to dance across the smooth, cool keys, executing complex passages with growing fluidity. The conservatorio is a living tapestry of sound, the plinking of lutes, the mournful cry of violins, the reedy wail of oboes, all interweaving with the persistent, almost inhumanly sustained vocal notes from distant practice rooms.
It was a cacophony of individual efforts, all striving for singular perfection, a testament to the sheer volume of dedication demanded. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, beeswax, and the faint metallic tang of instrument strings. The discipline was not merely strict, it was absolute. Maestri were figures of unquestioned authority. A single missed note, a lapse in concentration, a moment of perceived idleness could result in swift and painful punishment. The sting of a cane across your palms, the sharp rap on the knuckles, or the public humiliation of being forced to stand for hours were common. Emotional expression was discouraged. You were taught to channel all feeling into your voice, leaving your personal inner world suppressed. There was no room for childish whims or adolescent rebellion. Your life is no longer truly your own. It belongs to your voice, to the demanding standards of your art, and to the powerful institutions that sponsored you. The psychological toll of this existence is profound. You are cut off from the warmth and natural rhythms of family life. Holidays, celebrations, the small joys of everyday existence with loved ones became distant memories. Your peers in the conservatorio are your rivals as much as your companions, all striving for the same limited spots at the top. The competition is fierce, unspoken, yet ever present. You are surrounded by other boys who share your unique physical state, but each is also a reminder of your own lost normalcy. The isolation is deep-seated, a quiet ache that no amount of musical success can truly alleviate. You live in a bubble, separated from the broader society by your unusual condition and by the relentless pursuit of artistic perfection. Your meager free time, if it existed at all, was supervised and structured. Religious instruction, moral lessons, perhaps some limited access to books, but never true leisure or self-directed play. The outside world, the bustling marketplace, the carefree laughter of children, the ordinary lives of families, became an increasingly alien concept. You were a specialist, shaped and refined for a singular purpose. This unyielding regimen, this constant suppression of self for the sake of art, forged not only your extraordinary musical abilities, but also an iron core of resilience, discipline, and perhaps a quiet, lingering sadness for the innocence and normalcy forever lost within the echoing, demanding walls of your training. Your body was an instrument, and your soul, though capable of expressing profound beauty, became a tightly controlled vessel, forever marked by its origins. The living conditions within these conservatorios were rarely luxurious. Dormitories were often crowded, with dozens of boys sleeping on simple straw mattresses, the air thick with the scent of bodies, damp clothes, and the lingering residue of old wood smoke from meagre fires. Heating in winter was minimal, leading to cold, damp conditions that often fostered illness. Hygiene was rudimentary, contributing to the spread of disease among the closely packed students. Meals were basic and repetitive, designed for survival rather than enjoyment. Thin gruel, stale bread, perhaps a small piece of cheese or a few olives. The sheer monotony of the diet was itself a form of subtle deprivation. This Spartan existence, far from the promised luxury, instilled a hardened resilience, but also a deep-seated craving for comfort and indulgence that some would later pursue relentlessly in their adult lives. The stark contrast between the heavenly voice they were cultivating and the earthly, often grim reality of their daily lives was profound. Each day was a testament to endurance, a battle against the gnawing chill,
the persistent hunger, and the relentless pressure to transform a vulnerable child into an unparalleled musical instrument. Their dreams, though nurtured by the potential of their voice, were often shadowed by the harsh, tangible discomforts of their immediate surroundings. The emotional landscape of the conservatorio was one of constant pressure and suppressed emotion, where joy was often fleeting and triumph quickly followed by renewed demands for perfection. The walls of the conservatorio, while providing structure, also confined, creating an artificial world where the normal markers of growing up were replaced by an intense, singular focus on the vocal cords. Even the subtle sounds of the building itself, the creak of old floorboards, the drip of a leaky roof, the distant murmur of city life beyond the thick walls, served as constant, quiet reminders of a world they were training to conquer, yet remained profoundly separate from, etching a unique sense of isolation into their very being. Every single aspect of their existence, from the hard ground beneath their beds to the biting cold of winter, was a stark counterpoint to the sublime beauty they were being shaped to produce. This relentless regimen, spanning many years of their most formative period, ensured not only vocal mastery, but also a deep, perhaps irreversible psychological conditioning, molding them into something simultaneously extraordinary and profoundly unfulfilled in the conventional sense. Chapter 5. Whispers and Stares. Social Isolation. Even as your voice blossoms and your technical mastery grows within the confines of the conservatorio, the world outside remains a place of complex social dynamics, where your unique physical state positions you in an ambiguous and often isolating space. As you step out into society, whether for an audition, a rare public performance, or simply a supervised outing, you become acutely aware of the whispers, the stares, the subtle yet pervasive judgment. Your appearance is a constant signifier of your condition. The elongated limbs, the disproportionate chest, the smooth, hairless face that never quite sheds the look of adolescence, combined with an adult height. These are not just physical traits, they are social markers. In a society rigidly defined by gender roles, you exist in a liminal space, neither fully man nor boy, and certainly not woman. This ambiguity can be unsettling for others, leading to curiosity that borders on invasive, or a discomfort that manifests as thinly veiled disdain. Imagine walking through a bustling piazza. The vivid colors of market stalls, the cries of vendors, the rich aroma of spices and fresh bread, all assault your senses. But louder than any of these is the silent chorus of eyes upon you. A group of young men might exchange knowing glances, their hushed comments reaching your ears like sharp barbs. Children might point, their innocent curiosity turning into something more uncomfortable as their parents quickly pull them away, murmuring, "Hush." You learn to interpret these glances, to recognize the pity in some eyes, the fascination in others, and the outright revulsion in still more. You become accustomed to the casual cruelty of strangers, the veiled insults, the assumptions. Some might treat you with exaggerated politeness, as if you are a delicate object. Others might treat you with thinly disguised contempt, seeing you as less than a man. The term eunuch might be whispered, carrying with it connotations of servitude and incompleteness, a stark contrast to the divine artistry you are trained to embody. This constant external validation of your otherness can gnaw at your self-worth, even as you strive for musical perfection.
Within the social circles you inhabit, the courts of nobility, the salons of patrons, the opera houses, you might be admired for your talent, even idolized. But this adoration is often conditional. It is for your voice, for the beautiful sound you create, not necessarily for you as a whole person. You are an exotic phenomenon, a marvel, a possession to be flaunted, but rarely are you seen as an equal, a fully integrated member of society, with the same rights and expectations as other men. Patrons might treat you as an expensive pet, showering you with gifts and luxuries, yet subtly reminding you of your dependent status. The most profound isolation stems from the denial of fundamental human experiences. Marriage, for instance, is largely impossible. No respectable family would allow their daughter to marry a castrato. Ensuring the continuation of their lineage was paramount. The inability to have children means you can never fully participate in the societal structure of family and dynasty. You are destined to remain childless, a branch severed from the family tree. This fundamental biological difference creates an emotional chasm between you and the majority of society, a barrier that even the most soaring aria cannot bridge. Intimate relationships are fraught with complexity. While some castrati might have formed romantic bonds, these were often unconventional, discreet, and sometimes tinged with an underlying loneliness. The lack of masculine development, the unique physical form, the societal stigma, all contributed to a sense of being perpetually separate, set apart from the intimate lives of others. You might long for connection, for deep understanding, but find that your condition acts as an invisible wall, preventing true emotional intimacy. Even among your own musical fraternity, among other castrati, there is a strange camaraderie mixed with fierce competition. You share a common bond of experience, a shared suffering, but also a shared ambition for limited glory. True, unburdened friendship can be difficult to forge in such a high-stakes, competitive environment. Everyone is vying for the attention of patrons, the most coveted roles, the highest fees. So, while your voice might soar to the heavens, reaching the ears of kings and commoners alike, your feet remain firmly planted on the earth, often on the periphery of society. You are a celebrated anomaly, revered for your sound, but pitied or scorned for your state. This constant internal and external struggle, the dissonance between your artistic triumph and your social alienation, forms a silent, enduring burden. You learn to live with the whispers, to deflect the stares, to construct a persona that masks the quiet ache of loneliness. Your life becomes a meticulously choreographed performance, not just on the stage, but in every social interaction, a constant negotiation of your otherness in a world that struggles to comprehend you. The golden cage of fame indeed often proved to be an iron isolation. The moment you stepped outside the cloistered walls of the conservatorio, the full weight of your otherness pressed in. The air, no longer confined to the stale scent of practice rooms, carried the bustling aromas of the city, roasting meat, pungent spices, the sharp tang of horse manure, and the sweetness of ripe fruit. But it was the visual and auditory landscape that truly assaulted your senses and your self-perception. Every public outing, whether a supervised walk to a church or an audition in a nobleman's palace, became a carefully choreographed dance of self-presentation. You walked with a conscious awareness of your elongated stride, your distinctive lack of an Adam's apple, the almost feminine smoothness of your jawline that defied the expectations for a man of your adult height. The stares were omnipresent, a silent, pervasive hum. Some were simply curious, a fleeting glance from a child, wide-eyed at your unusual appearance. But others were more loaded. The knowing, sometimes leering stares from groups of young men, often accompanied by hushed laughter and crude whispers that were just loud enough to reach your ears. The word eunuch might be hissed, carrying with it centuries of derogatory connotations, a symbol of weakness, servitude, or sexual abnormality. For every admiring gaze fixed on your angelic face on stage, there were dozens of judgmental, dismissive looks in the everyday world. You learned to read them, to anticipate them, to build an internal shield against their sting. Navigating social gatherings was a precarious tightrope walk. In the salons of the wealthy, you might be introduced as the extraordinary signor, your name, a marvel to be admired, a living spectacle. Ladies might flutter their fans, their eyes wide with fascination at your unique voice and youthful appearance. But even amidst such adoration, there was an underlying dynamic of being an object, a prized possession, rather than a truly respected individual. You were there to entertain, to impress, to add a touch of exoticism to their gatherings. Your opinions beyond music were rarely sought, your full humanity rarely acknowledged. You were a beautiful instrument, nothing more, to be played and then put away. The scent of fine perfumes, rich wines, and exotic delicacies that filled these salons often masked the underlying scent of patronage and subtle dehumanization. The denial of a conventional family life was perhaps the deepest wound.
In a society where marriage and procreation were central pillars of male identity and social standing, your infertility was a profound mark of exclusion. No respectable family would knowingly marry their daughter to a castrato, for the continuation of the family name was paramount. The very idea was antithetical to societal norms. This meant that the comfort of a wife, the joy of children, the stability of a family unit, all were forever denied to you. You were a branch severed from the family tree, destined to walk a lonely path, regardless of your professional triumphs. The quiet ache of this reality was a constant companion, especially when you witnessed the bustling, messy warmth of ordinary family life around you. Intimate relationships are fraught with complexity. While some castrati might have formed romantic bonds, these were often unconventional, discreet, and sometimes tinged with an underlying loneliness. The lack of masculine development, the unique physical form, the societal stigma, all contributed to a sense of being perpetually separate, set apart from the intimate lives of others. You might long for connection, for deep understanding, but find that your condition acts as an invisible wall, preventing true emotional intimacy. Even among your own musical fraternity, among other castrati, there is a strange camaraderie mixed with fierce competition. You share a common bond of experience, a shared suffering, but also a shared ambition for limited glory. True, unburdened friendship can be difficult to forge in such a high-stakes, competitive environment. Everyone is vying for the attention of patrons, the most coveted roles, the highest fees. So while your voice might soar to the heavens, reaching the ears of kings and commoners alike, your feet remain firmly planted on the earth, often on the periphery of society. You are a celebrated anomaly, revered for your sound, but pitied or scorned for your state. This constant internal and external struggle, the dissonance between your artistic triumph and your social alienation, forms a silent, enduring burden. You learn to live with the whispers, to deflect the stares, to construct a persona that masks the quiet ache of loneliness. Your life becomes a meticulously choreographed performance, not just on the stage, but in every social interaction, a constant negotiation of your otherness in a world that struggles to comprehend you. The golden cage of fame, indeed, often proved to be an iron isolation. The subtle microaggressions of daily life chipped away at your self-esteem, even for the most celebrated castrato. Imagine the awkward silences that followed a casual question about family, or the sudden changes of topic when conversation turned to marriage or children. The knowledge that you were an exception, an anomaly, permeated every social interaction. You might try to compensate with an exaggerated charm, a witty repartee, or an air of detachment. But the underlying vulnerability was always present. Your clothing, no matter how rich or fashionable, couldn't quite disguise the physical differences, and the way it hung on your elongated frame might draw subtle, unwelcome attention. The very architecture of society, designed for men and women, seemed to subtly exclude you, leaving you perpetually outside the mainstream, observing life from a peculiar gilded window. This constant awareness of being on the outside looking in contributed to a profound and enduring sense of loneliness, a quiet ache that even the most thunderous applause could not entirely quell. The price of your extraordinary voice was a life lived in a unique form of social exile, eternally marked by what you were not, even as you excelled at what you were.
Your unusual physical form, a direct result of your childhood trauma, became a constant, silent signifier in a world that often failed to look beyond the surface, further cementing your internal sense of difference. This profound alienation was a quiet cross you bore, a constant low thrum beneath the dazzling surface of your public persona, forever separating you from the very world that adored your sound. The quiet societal judgment, whether overt or implied, ensured that even the most celebrated castrato was acutely aware of the deep chasm between his artistic triumph and his personal reality. This inherent tension, a paradox lived daily, contributed to a life that, despite its external brilliance, was often deeply marked by an internal, unresolvable sense of incompleteness. Chapter 6. The Fleeting Glory and Bitter End. After years, sometimes decades, of relentless training and social navigation, the moment of glory often arrives. Your voice, now fully matured in its unique, unearthly timbre, resonates with power and purity. You might achieve immense fame, becoming a celebrated virtuoso, a star in an age before mass media. Your name, perhaps Farinelli, or Senesino, or Caffarelli, would be whispered in palaces and shouted in opera houses across Europe. You would command astronomical fees, wear garments of the finest silk and velvet, and be showered with jewels and gifts from adoring patrons. The aroma of fine perfumes, rich wines, and exotic delicacies would replace the stale air of your conservatorio days. Imagine stepping onto the grand stage of a Venetian opera house, the flickering candlelight illuminating the ornate frescoes, the air thick with the scent of 1,000 eager spectators. The roar of the crowd greets your entrance, a thunderous ovation that sends shivers down your spine. You open your mouth, and a sound unlike any other fills the vast space, a soprano voice with the power and resonance of a grown man, capable of breathtaking agility, soaring high above the orchestra, holding notes for impossibly long durations. The audience is spellbound, tears streaming down their faces, hearts pounding with the sheer emotional force of your performance. For these fleeting moments, you are divine, adored, transcendent. This is the promised land, the reward for your unimaginable sacrifice. But even at the zenith of your career, the glory is a shimmering, fragile thing. The pressure is immense, a constant, suffocating weight. Every performance must be perfect, every note flawless. Audiences are fickle, critics are merciless, and rivals are always waiting in the wings, eager to exploit any perceived weakness. The physical demands are brutal, constant travel in uncomfortable carriages, performing night after night, often unwell, under the glaring lights of the stage. You live under constant scrutiny, every gesture, every expression, every note judged. The exhaustion is bone deep, a perpetual state of fatigue that even the most luxurious surroundings cannot dispel. And the competition within the ranks of castrati is legendary, fierce, and often ruthless. While there might be camaraderie, there's also intense rivalry for the most lucrative contracts, the most prestigious roles. Stories abound of rivalries spilling off the stage, of feuds and sabotage, of intense jealousy festering beneath polite smiles. You are constantly aware that another, younger, perhaps even more talented castrato might be waiting to usurp your position, eager to claim your fame and fortune. Your vocal prowess is your entire worth, and any sign of decline, any whisper of a faltering voice, is a terrifying threat to your livelihood and identity. The patrons who once adored you can also be demanding, capricious, and controlling. You are their prized possession, expected to entertain, to socialize, to align with their political and social whims. Your independence is an illusion. You are bound by contracts, by expectations, by the need to maintain favor. The gilded cage remains, simply larger and more opulent. The subtle humiliation of being treated as a beautiful, expensive object rather than a respected individual can gnaw at you, even amidst the most lavish praise and the most extravagant gifts. The scent of their rich, opulent homes sometimes masked the underlying smell of ownership. Then comes the inevitable, bitter end. The human voice, even the extraordinary castrato voice, is not immune to the ravages of time. As you age, your vocal cords, though preserved from puberty's changes, still begin to lose their elasticity. The breath control, once effortless, requires more conscious effort. The highest notes might become harder to reach, the agility a little less precise. The timbre might subtly change, losing some of its youthful purity. This decline is terrifying, a slow, agonizing descent from the peak of your powers. Each tremor, each missed nuance is a stark reminder that your gift, your livelihood, your very identity is fading. For many castrati, this decline meant a harsh reality check. Few managed to sustain their immense wealth or fame. Some might find a new career as a choir master, a singing teacher, or a court musician in a less demanding role. Others, less fortunate or less adaptable, could face poverty and obscurity. Imagine going from being showered with jewels to struggling for your next meal, from grand palaces to a small dusty room, the echoes of applause a fading memory. The contrast would be devastating, a profound sense of loss and abandonment. And as the practice of castration for musical purposes slowly declined in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, deemed increasingly barbaric and inhumane, the last remaining castrati became living relics, curiosities from a vanishing era. They embodied a past that society was eager to forget, a dark chapter in music history. Their voices, once celebrated as divine, came to be seen by many as unnatural, even grotesque. The final years could be marked by loneliness, by a quiet dignity, or by a lingering bitterness, carrying the physical and emotional scars of a life lived for art, but not truly for themselves. Their glory was indeed fleeting, a brief blaze against the backdrop of a long, often painful, and ultimately unfulfilled existence. The ascendancy to stardom, when it came, was a dizzying experience, a stark contrast to the austere years of training. The very air you breathed now seemed charged with adulation. The smell of grease paint and stage dust mingled with the heady scent of expensive perfumes worn by your aristocratic admirers. You might find yourself arriving at the opera house in a gilded carriage, its wheels rumbling over cobblestones, cheered by throngs of eager fans who pressed against the velvet ropes. The roar of the crowd was a physical wave, washing over you, a sound unlike any other, a symphony of adoration and adoration. Stepping onto the stage beneath the blazing, smoky oil lamps that illuminated the vast auditorium was like entering another dimension. The costumes, heavy with embroidery and jewels, felt like a second skin, transforming you into the hero or heroine of the evening. The orchestra, a living, breathing entity, would swell, and then silence. A profound, expectant hush would fall over the thousands of spectators, their eyes fixed solely on you. Then the first note would emerge, clear and pure, filling the immense space, seeming to effortlessly reach the furthest corners of the highest gallery. The sustained notes, held for an almost impossible duration, would elicit gasps of awe. The intricate runs and trills, executed with breathtaking agility, would prompt spontaneous applause and cries of bravo or evviva. Flowers, jewels, even small, exquisite gifts would be tossed onto the stage, glittering offerings at your feet. For these moments you are transcendent, a conduit for beauty, a living legend. The adulation was intoxicating, a powerful balm for the silent wounds you carried. But the price of such glory was relentless, unrelenting pressure. Each performance was a high-stakes gamble. Audiences were notoriously fickle, their praise could turn to scorn in an instant. Critics, with their sharp quills and even sharper tongues, waited to dissect every perceived flaw. You lived in a constant state of vigilance, every note, every gesture, every nuance of your performance under intense scrutiny. The constant travel, often in uncomfortable, jarring carriages over rough roads, took a physical toll. Performing night after night, sometimes unwell, battling colds or fevers, was an immense strain. The constant exhaustion was bone deep, a pervasive fatigue that even the most luxurious surroundings cannot dispel. The world of castrati was a viper's nest of ambition and rivalry. While a certain camaraderie could exist, born of shared experience and suffering, it was often overshadowed by cutthroat competition. Stories of sabotage were rife, poisoned drinks, bribed stagehands, deliberately bad orchestral accompaniment, even physical altercations off-stage. Every lucrative contract, every leading role was a battle fought not just with vocal prowess, but with cunning, charm, and sometimes outright malice.
You were constantly aware that another, younger, perhaps even more talented castrato might be waiting to usurp your position, eager to claim your fame and fortune. You were constantly aware that another, younger, perhaps even more talented castrato might be waiting to usurp your position, eager to claim your fame and fortune.
Your voice, your unique gift, was your entire worth, and any hint of vocal decline, any rumor of a faltering pitch or lost agility, is a terrifying threat to your livelihood and identity. The relationship with your patrons, the powerful nobility and royalty who funded the opera houses and employed the greatest singers, was a complex dance of power. You were their prized possession, a living work of art to be flaunted, and their demands could be capricious and controlling. You were expected to attend their salons, entertain their guests, charming them with your wit as well as your voice, and often align with their political and social whims. Your independence, despite your fame, was an illusion. You are bound by stringent contracts, by the need to maintain favor, by a pervasive sense of obligation. The gilded cage, though larger and more adorned, was still a cage. The subtle humiliation of being treated as a beautiful, expensive object rather than a respected individual can gnaw at your soul, even amidst the most lavish praise and the most extravagant gifts. The scent of their rich, opulent homes sometimes masked the underlying smell of ownership. Then comes the inevitable, the cruel, slow march of time. The human voice, even one preserved by such drastic means, is not immune to age. As you entered your 40s and 50s, your vocal cords, though protected from puberty's changes, would begin to lose some of their youthful elasticity. The breath control, once effortless, now required immense conscious effort. The highest notes, once soaring freely, became harder to reach, perhaps tinged with a slight tremolo. The agility, once dazzling, felt a little less precise, the runs less fluid. The timbre, that unique quality of your voice, might subtly change, losing some of its bell-like purity, taking on a slightly harder or more fragile edge. This vocal decline was terrifying, a slow, agonizing descent from the pinnacle of your powers. Each tremor, each missed nuance, each instance where your voice betrayed you was a stark public reminder that your gift, your livelihood, your very identity is fading. For many castrati, this decline meant a harsh reality check. Few managed to sustain their immense wealth or fame. The adoring crowds moved on to newer, fresher voices. Some, shrewd and adaptable, might find new careers as choir masters, highly sought-after singing teachers, or court musicians in less demanding, more stable roles. They would pass on their unparalleled knowledge of vocal technique, shaping the next generation of singers. Others, less fortunate or less resilient, could face a precipitous fall into poverty and obscurity, their grand villas sold, their jewels pawned, living out their remaining years in small, dusty rooms, the echoes of past applause a tormenting memory. The contrast would be devastating, a profound sense of loss and abandonment. And as the practice of castration for musical purposes slowly declined in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, deemed increasingly barbaric and inhumane, the last remaining castrati became living relics, curiosities from a vanishing era. They embodied a past that society was eager to forget, a dark chapter in music history. Their voices, once celebrated as divine, came to be seen by many as unnatural, even grotesque.
The final years could be marked by loneliness, by a quiet dignity, or by a lingering bitterness, carrying the physical and emotional scars of a life lived for art, but not truly for themselves. Their glory was indeed fleeting, a brief blaze against the backdrop of a long, often painful, and ultimately unfulfilled existence. The constant demands of travel, traversing rough roads in poorly sprung carriages, often for days or weeks at a time, took a relentless toll on the body. You would arrive in a new city, exhausted, perhaps stiff and aching, only to immediately face rehearsals and performances.
The irregular sleep patterns, the unfamiliar beds, and the constant change in climate further drained your reserves. Beyond the physical, there was the mental strain of constantly learning new roles, adapting to different orchestral interpretations, and navigating the complex politics of court and opera house life. The pressure to maintain a consistently flawless performance was immense. Any perceived dip in quality could be catastrophic for your reputation and future engagements. The critics, often paid by rival impresarios or singers, were relentless, their sharp words capable of destroying a career overnight. The very air backstage could be thick with anxiety, the faint scent of fear mingling with the heady aroma of stage makeup and the nervous sweat of performers. Even at the height of your fame, the underlying stress was a constant companion, a quiet gnawing that no amount of public adulation could entirely soothe. The applause, while sweet, was a fleeting comfort against the pervasive pressures and physical demands that defined your life as a celebrated, yet fundamentally constrained artist. This was not a life of unbridled freedom, but one of perpetual performance, both on and off the stage, leading eventually to an almost inevitable decline and the harsh reality of an unfulfilled personal life. The scent of success, though intoxicating, always carried the bitter undertones of sacrifice and loss. Chapter 7. Echoes in the Silence. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th and new musical styles emerged, the demand for the castrato voice began to wane. The grand, flamboyant opera seria, with its emphasis on vocal acrobatics, slowly yielded to the more dramatic and emotionally expressive bel canto, and later the powerful natural voices of sopranos and tenors.
The changing tides of aesthetic preference played a role, but so too did a growing moral consciousness, a nascent understanding of human rights that slowly but surely deemed the practice of castration for art an abominable act. The whispers that once surrounded castrati now grew into louder condemnations. Enlightenment ideals championed reason and individual liberty, making the non-consensual mutilation of a child for aesthetic purposes increasingly indefensible. The Church, which had once sanctioned and even encouraged the practice for its choirs, began to quietly distance itself, though it took until the early 20th century for the Vatican to officially ban castrati from its choirs. The very sound, once revered as heavenly, started to be perceived by many as unnatural, even a little grotesque, a bizarre relic of a bygone era. The last great castrato, Alessandro Moreschi, performed in the Sistine Chapel choir well into the early 20th century, a haunting echo of a vanishing world. He was even recorded, his voice preserved on wax cylinders, a thin, wavering sound that offers a rare, poignant glimpse into a vocal tradition that spanned centuries. Listening to his recordings today, one can hear the purity and the agility, but also a certain fragility,
a sense of something deeply melancholic. He became a living artifact, a final embodiment of a practice that had finally been deemed morally reprehensible. Their legacy, therefore, is complex and deeply paradoxical. On one hand, castrati were undisputed musical titans, driving vocal innovation, pushing the boundaries of human vocal capability, and inspiring some of the most beautiful and intricate music ever written. Handel, Mozart, Gluck, all composed for these extraordinary voices, their works forever intertwined with the unique qualities of the castrato's range and power. They were at the heart of the golden age of opera, thrilling audiences and elevating the art form. Their contribution to classical music is undeniable, a vibrant chapter etched into the annals of sound. Yet this unparalleled artistic achievement came at an unbearable human cost. Each soaring aria, each breathtaking cadenza was built upon a foundation of childhood trauma, physical mutilation, and lifelong psychological scars. The ethical debate surrounding their existence continues to this day, a stark reminder of how cultural values and artistic demands can sometimes tragically eclipse fundamental human dignity. The question lingers: can such profound beauty ever truly justify such profound suffering? The silence that followed their decline is not just the absence of their unique voices. It is a profound silence, a quiet testament to the ending of an era, a closing of a dark yet fascinating chapter in human history. It is a silence that invites reflection, urging us to consider the prices we pay for art, the sacrifices we demand, and the lines we draw, or fail to draw, in the pursuit of beauty or perceived divine glory. Their lives, though often filled with fame and fortune, were also marked by profound loneliness, by a constant negotiation of their ambiguous identity, and by the enduring physical and emotional consequences of a non-consensual act. They were living, breathing instruments, celebrated for their sound, but often denied the fullness of human experience. Their story is a powerful cautionary tale about desperation, ambition, and the darker side of artistic patronage. As you drift now, let the echoes of their extraordinary haunting voices fade into the quietude of your mind. Remember them not just as performers, as figures of historical curiosity, but as children forced into an unimaginable path, as individuals who navigated a life of immense pressure, profound personal sacrifice, and enduring loneliness. Their suffering, however unwillingly given, undeniably gave birth to a sublime art, a beauty that even now, centuries later, still holds the power to move, to disturb, and to astonish. Their story is a reminder that history is not just a collection of facts, but a tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, beauty and barbarity. Let your breathing deepen, your body relax fully into the surface beneath you. Imagine the quiet, cool embrace of sleep drawing over you now, like a gentle, comforting blanket. All the day's concerns, all the lingering thoughts can simply melt away and release. You are safe. You are warm. You are held in this moment of peaceful calm, drifting deeper and deeper into rest. The journey through the past is over for tonight. Let the historical echoes settle, leaving behind only peace. Good night, weary traveler. May your dreams be deep and your rest be profound. Sleep well, and may you awaken refreshed and ready for a new day.
The decline of the castrato was not a sudden dramatic event, but a gradual, almost imperceptible fading, like a long drawn-out final note. The changing operatic landscape played a crucial role. The burgeoning Romantic movement championed authenticity, emotional rawness, and the natural voice. The elaborate, highly ornamental style of Baroque opera, which was the castrato's natural habitat, began to give way to operas that valued dramatic realism and powerful, impassioned singing from unaltered voices. The castrato's artificiality, once their greatest asset, now became a liability. Their unique timbre, once heavenly, began to sound, to some ears, cold, unfeeling, or even unsettlingly unnatural in this new aesthetic context. The very sound that had brought them glory now risked moving them to discomfort or even a sense of the grotesque. Simultaneously, the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment were gaining strength across Europe.
Philosophers and thinkers championed ideals of reason, individual liberty, and human dignity. Against this backdrop, the practice of castrating young boys for aesthetic purposes became increasingly difficult to defend. What was once accepted as a necessary sacrifice for art began to be viewed as barbaric mutilation. Pamphlets and essays denouncing the practice circulated, particularly in Northern Europe, creating a moral pressure that was hard to ignore. The very term castrato began to carry a weight of revulsion, a stark reminder of the inhumane origins of their beautiful voices. Even in Italy, where the tradition was deeply entrenched, the public appetite for such spectacle began to wane, replaced by a preference for singers who could achieve vocal brilliance without such a profound personal cost. The gradual fading of their presence on the opera stage was a slow, public acknowledgement of a moral reckoning. Even within the bastion of their original purpose, the Catholic Church, the institution that had arguably perpetuated the practice most consistently for its sacred choirs, the change was slower, more reluctant, but ultimately inevitable. While the Sistine Chapel Choir maintained castrati into the early 20th century, becoming the last bastion of the tradition, the broader church began to phase them out. The official decree from Pope Pius X in 1903, which explicitly banned castrati from the papal choir, was the symbolic final act, a definitive closing of a centuries-old chapter. It was a formal acknowledgement by the highest religious authority that the beauty of a voice could no longer justify such a profound violation of a human being. The sound of the castrato, once believed to be the closest to the angels, was finally recognized as a sound born of human suffering. Alessandro Moreschi, the Angel of Rome, stands as a poignant, singular figure. His recordings, captured between 1902 and 1904, are invaluable.
They offer a rare, direct auditory link to a vanished vocal tradition. His voice, thin and reedy, yet possessing an astonishing purity and agility, allows us a glimpse into the sound that captivated millions. But listening closely, one also perceives a fragility, a certain wistfulness, perhaps even a subtle sense of a voice that carries the weight of its own unique history. Moreschi himself, with his distinct physical characteristics, a smooth, unlined face that defied his advanced age, combined with the elongated limbs typical of castrati, became a living, breathing anachronism. He was a museum piece in human form, a poignant reminder of a practice that had finally and mercifully faded into history. His life, dedicated to sacred music, was a final echo of a practice that the modern world could no longer tolerate, forcing a direct confrontation with the stark reality of the human cost behind the sublime art. The paradox of the castrati's legacy is perhaps their most enduring lesson. They were, without doubt, innovators. Their unique vocal capabilities pushed the boundaries of singing technique, influencing generations of composers and vocalists. Operas written for them by masters like Handel and Mozart remain cornerstones of the classical repertoire, a testament to their unparalleled artistry. They were celebrities of a scale unimaginable in their time, commanding vast fortunes and adulation across continents. Yet this artistic triumph was inextricably linked to profound personal tragedy. Every soaring note, every intricate cadenza was fundamentally predicated on the physical and psychological mutilation of a child. The ethical questions their existence raises are as relevant today as they were centuries ago. What are the limits of artistic pursuit? What sacrifices are acceptable in the name of beauty or cultural demand?
The ultimate silence that descended upon the operatic stages and church choirs, the absence of those unique voices, is therefore not merely an end, but an invitation. It invites us to reflect on the complexities of history, where light and shadow, beauty and barbarity often coexist. It urges us to look beyond the glittering facade of fame and appreciate the profound human stories, the quiet suffering and the incredible resilience of individuals who lived lives shaped by unimaginable circumstances. Their story reminds us that progress in human dignity often comes slowly, painfully, and only after long periods of unquestioning acceptance of practices that are, in retrospect, horrific. The castrato's voice, now a mere echo on old recordings, remains a powerful, if uncomfortable, reminder of the cost of art and the enduring struggle for human autonomy. It is a story that prompts us to remember, to question, and to ensure that such a profound sacrifice is never again demanded in the name of beauty. The fading of their echoes marks a moral triumph, a recognition that the pursuit of aesthetic perfection should never come at the expense of inherent human dignity. The reverberations of their suffering continue to remind us of the delicate balance between artistic ambition and human integrity, urging a compassionate lens on the past. The profound quiet that settled over the stages and chapels was not just the end of an era, but a silent testament to a shift in human values. A realization that true beauty cannot be born from profound suffering imposed on the innocent. Their haunting melodies, though lost to us in live performance, continue to challenge our understanding of art, ethics, and the sacrifices made in pursuit of the sublime.